Starting out with a quick announcement before we dive into today's episode. We are having a free masterclass on January 30th from 12 to 1 Eastern Time, and the topic is Shape Up Your Weekly Executive Team Meetings for a High Impact Year. So, whether you're tackling tough meeting challenges or fine tuning an already strong meeting culture, you're not going to want to miss these 7 game changing tactics. Register today at capstoneleadership.net/upcoming events or email us at info@capstoneleadership.net and we'll send you a registration link, or you'll see it in the show notes below.
While we're all working for the same organization and we may even work in the same department, our experiences could be and likely are vastly different. And so it's that perspective, that diversity in perspective, that brings a unique opportunity for us to, in a different way, band together to accomplish the strategic goals of the organization.
Welcome to Culture Change RX, the podcast for healthcare professionals that are committed to creating a thriving workplace culture, improving the experiences of employees and patients, and ultimately unlocking their organization's next level of potential. I'm Sue Tetzloff, your host and co-founder of Capstone Leadership Solutions. Join me and my insightful guests each week as we share actionable insights for navigating the crucial people side of the business of healthcare. Subscribe now for a weekly dose of Culture Change RX. Now let's dive into this week's conversation where culture change takes center stage. Welcome to another episode of Culture Change RX. And today is one of those fun episodes where I get to have a guest in the studio. So it's not just me blah-blahing to myself. I have a real person to talk to here today, and it is Greg. And I'm just going to do what I always do and start with that introduction of the guest and let him do it himself because he'll do it best. Here you go, Greg.
Thank you, Sue. So glad to be here today. My name is Greg Opseth. I am currently the Chief Operating Officer for Highland Medical Staffing, located in Jefferson, Iowa, in central Iowa. We are a small staffing company that support critical access hospitals. Critical access hospitals are very near and dear to my heart as I have previous experience as a CNO, so know that world very well and the struggles that come with running day-to-day operations for a critical access hospital.
Mm-hmm. And not surprising that I would have a guest that's passionate about small rural hospitals and leadership in them and improvement of them. So glad to have you here, Greg. Very glad to have you here. When we were talking recently, I learned that you've been doing some speaking and some training and some things of that nature. And in particular, a recent conference you were speaking at in Iowa related to patient safety and some topics of leadership related to that. And I thought it would be a great topic for today's conversation around culture and improvement of healthcare and healthcare organizations. So tell us a little bit about that recent event and the message that you wanted to share with that audience.
So thank you. I had the opportunity to speak at the Iowa Healthcare Collaborative's Patient Safety Conference, and the opportunity came about to speak on the role of leadership in patient safety, and specifically leveraging the experience that I had at Guthrie County Hospital as the Chief Nursing Officer and also in my current role as the Chief Operating Officer. So I really focused heavily on the time in the hospital because that was the most applicable to the audience. So really what it boiled down to and what my primary message was is about authentic leadership and being my authentic self. I very much pride myself in here I am and you can like me or not, but we're going to get in this together and we're going to do this. You're going to know who I am. I'm going to get to know who you are, and we're going to do this together. It really was around me being able to share with the attendees what we accomplished at Guthrie, some of the failures and what we learned from those failures and how we ultimately led those to successes. So the one thing that really continues to stick out to me that I shared during the conference was my leadership story and kind of the very quick elevation to executive leadership that I experienced. So I graduated in 2012 with my BSN and immediately went into work. And within a year and a half, entered into a Master's of Healthcare Administration program. So I had been a nurse for just a year and a half and then put my hat in the ring for a CNO job that came open. And wouldn't you know it, the hospital chose me in that role. And so there was a lot of expectation and a lot of experience from the staff there. And so there were things that I had to learn. And that's where the authenticity comes in, that I'm not the previous leaders. I don't approach things in a similar fashion, perhaps, but that doesn't make it right or wrong. That's just who I am. And we're going to learn about this together. And so my favorite thing to share about being authentic is not taking myself so seriously. While this is such a serious job and we have very serious things to consider in the hospital, we have patients' lives in our hands and we have to really be in touch with best practice. But when the time allows and when the opportunities arise, we really need to have fun and enjoy one another. And that's where the authenticity comes in place. And so Christmas was always one of my favorite times of the year when I worked in the hospital. We encouraged everyone to wear ugly sweaters or some type of swag. So I would come dressed up in, anything from a Cousin Eddie get up from Christmas Vacation to wearing stockings on my legs and coming in shorts and super ugly light up shirts, and even came as Buddy the Elf one time. So just really enjoy that my authentic self. I love seeing the smile on the patients' faces, and they get to see the nurses enjoying themselves and seeing that even though we're in a very serious environment, we have an opportunity to really be ourselves. And so that's really what I focus on and what I try really hard to approach my leadership from an authentic perspective, that I always ask myself, would I do what I'm asking others to do? Would I myself do that? And if the answer is no, then I have to reframe that. And that's my number one approach to leadership is that. And so thinking back to many of the things that we encountered at Guthrie and some of our successes, I think one of my favorite is the recognition program and implementing the Daisy Award. That is a world-renowned program, and unfortunately, we didn't have that at the organization, and so we were able to launch that, accompanying CNA recognition as well. And that was so much fun, and the opportunity to showcase what we had for nursing staff and the care that we were delivering was just incredible. And so when you look at that from a patient safety perspective, as a nurse leader, I wasn't at the bedside day in and day out. I wasn't physically taking care of the patients, but what I was doing was creating an environment that was safe for the employees, that was safe for them to come to work, and ultimately led them to offer safe care to the patients. And so it wasn't a top down or bottom up. We had to work together in a symbiotic relationship so that I could do my job, they could do their job, and we could come together in a collective fashion to be successful. And that's just me. That's my leadership approach in a nutshell.
Like you describe yourself as bringing that element of fun and lightheartedness and the relationship piece and the celebration piece and all of that. And I'm like, okay, what would that be for me? And I think I have an answer. I think now reflecting back when I was a chief nursing officer, it was my optimism and my positivity. In your point of that, it's not always fun and games. It's serious sometimes. And there's individual situations and people where it's not fun at all. I know you're a very strategic leader as well, though. And that's part of your, it's just that your approach to being very strategic, making improvements, making things safe, all of that was grounded in some very thoughtful and strategic approaches. I know it was. I know that about you.
Yes. And I appreciate you bringing up the strategic approach, because that was probably one of my most fond and proud memories as the chief nurse at Guthrie, was the implementation of the strategic planning pillar groups and the employee-driven teams. That was something that, to say that just created an environment of safety is an understatement. We had roughly about between 120 and 140 employees. By the way that we made up our pillar groups and the employee-driven teams, we had 25% of our employees directly involved in strategic planning on a month-to-month basis. And that was something that we prided ourselves on. And when we launched those pillar groups, that was one of the first things that we highlighted, was the fact that this is how small our organization is, but we have the opportunity to have a quarter of our employees directly involved in strategic planning. To say it took a lot of work to get it off the ground is an understatement, but it wasn't work to me. It was an incredible passion, and the excitement that I found myself having was easy for me to share the why and to get buy-in, because the employees could see the passion in me. They could see the excitement and the futuristic and strategic thinking, and they wanted to come on board. And I was okay if they didn't want to. I told them, if this is not something you feel inclined to do, I don't want you to become part of the group, but you need to support the work of the group. You still have a role, even if you're not going to be in one of the pillar groups. Your work is still going to matter, and you still will contribute. You just will be in a more indirect capacity than maybe someone as part of the pillar group. And it was really important for me to have members of the administrative team or the senior team to be involved in every one of those pillar groups, whether it was on the pillar group themselves or as an administrative sponsor to that pillar group. And then we also had a director of one of the departments as the pillar group champion. And so that was probably the most successful thing, because then the pillar groups were just that, employee led. They were led by employees. We had a strategic plan for the organization. We had goals for the organization. And so how were each pillar group going to align their functions according to those strategic priorities of the organization? And having monthly lunch and learns with each pillar group was successful, because those pillar groups had the opportunity to stand in front of their peers and the rest of the organization and share what they're doing, seek input, seek advice on what they could do, and how can they become involved in whatever initiative it is. I think one of my favorite was the external stakeholder conversation about how do we solicit or get additional service lines for the organization. While that's our role as senior leaders to go out and secure those, what better way than to get the employees to help us know what are they hearing in the community? What do they themselves need that would be beneficial to not have to drive a half hour, 45 minutes to an hour to access that service. And so that was something that was incredibly rewarding to see those people come to the room and share. And we made sure that it was also accessible to the night shift, because running a 24/7 operation, it's so incredibly difficult to not have the night shift feel included, and it not just be pizza in the fridge or a recording that later is watched, but something that's actually live and available to them. So that was something that was really important to me, and I think led to some of the success that we had, because it was very intentional to include the night shift, because that was something that was just that, it was a priority. And so I asked each pillar group to include someone who worked night shift. In our organization, nurses were primarily the only ones working night shift. We had ancillary services on call, so they were involved in care during the evening and overnight hours, but primarily in the building, it was our nursing staff. So I wanted to ensure that those night nurses specifically were concretely involved in the process. And that was, again, something that was very, very important to me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, the importance of the night shift. I remember when I first became a chief nursing officer, I don't even remember where I heard it. I just remember when I heard it, it stuck, where someone had said to me, when you're leading nursing improvements and services and getting them optimized to deliver great care consistently, every patient, every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they impressed upon me that there's the day hospital and the night hospital and the weekend hospital and the holiday hospital. And it didn't take me long to realize that things did work differently in those 4 distinct kind of ways. And, if you're a patient admitted on a Saturday versus a Tuesday, it really should kind of work the same. And if they have a 4-day length of stay, if 2 of those are on a weekend or a holiday, it shouldn't impact their length of stay or the quality of care because certain services aren't available or we're staffed differently or certain equipment isn't available or whatever. So yeah, I remember thinking about that too. But even when you take that all into account and you try to create one united culture and organization and a systematic process that happens, as it should every hour of the day, it's interesting that I always find that the night culture is a little bit different. Like if you're primarily working nights, and I think one thing I noticed about that, I don't know what you think, is I feel like they join together and work together in a way that's different. Maybe it's to your point that there's not as many of them. Maybe it's all nursing, like you said. And so they really have to rely on each other. There isn't a lot of leadership around. There isn't a lot of ancillary around. And they really have to pull together to make things happen during their shift. And so even though we can make sure that the systems work well for them, and things like recognition and involvement and opportunities to participate are available to them, I always find the night culture to be a little bit different. And I think in a positive way. There I go with my positivity again.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. And that was one of the reasons why I was so intentional to ensure that we had access, or that the night shift had access to membership on the pillar groups, for that exact reason. Because while we're all working for the same organization and we may even work in the same department, our experiences could be and likely are vastly different. And so it's that perspective, that diversity in perspective, that brings a unique opportunity for us to, in a different way, band together to accomplish the strategic goals of the organization. The number one goal in this entire thing for our organization was to ensure every person could articulate their role. What is my role? How do I contribute to this goal? So it goes such a wide variety, and that too, it all the way up to the CEO. How can day to day, how can we ensure that the CEO is integrated into a multitude of levels? One of my favorite stories related to his involvement in this was we were able to get him involved in rounding with our patients, specifically asking those questions about their stay and their care. And our favorite story, and one that's still talked about today, is one of our patients thought that he was actually a priest because he was notorious for wearing bow ties, and she mistook that for the ministerial collar. And so before he left, she requested him to pray with her. And so we're all in the hallway and we are just rolling. We are loving it because the CEO, he was such an introvert, and ironically, that was just not a strong suit for him. Very skilled at running the organization and very skilled in other ways, but that patient interaction was not one of those. And so for him to on the fly come up with a prayer for that patient was absolutely priceless. And we gave him a standing ovation when he came out in the hallway. And, it's those small, authentic ways that just reinforce what we do. And for him to take that so lighthearted and just run with it, that patient actually made reference to that in the patient satisfaction survey. And so it just demonstrates that any patient encounter in any capacity can be memorable, in no matter who you are or what you're interacting with the patient for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that is a great story. And those get spread, don't they? I mean, like, it becomes a lesson for all of us. Any one of us could have been in a situation where we would have had to do something that was not usually our job and maybe not something we'd usually do and makes us uncomfortable. It could happen to us any day. And how are we going to respond based on the lesson of this example? So yeah, stories like that are very powerful in culture and behavior change in organizations and really role modeling what we want. So that's a great one. I hadn't heard that one. Before we jumped on today, we were talking about life and the holidays and things going on in work and home. And you mentioned something to me about volunteering at your local school. And we started talking about how culture of a hospital is not much different than culture of education, of a school environment, and also leadership, how important leadership is in any organization, including a school. Would you share a little bit about, how you got to be volunteering there? And again, your authentic leadership showed up there. So you're a volunteer, but you're also authentically, you as you approach this. I just think it's so cool. I think it's worth sharing if you don't mind.
Yeah. So full disclosure, something I've always struggled with is self-care and finding ways to fill my bucket because I'm a filler of others. And so we all know the adage, you can't fill others' cup if yours isn't fully itself. And so while that continues to be something that I have to prioritize, one outlet or one way that I've identified to fill my cup is to volunteer at the school where my children attend, the elementary school. And so there's a program there that's called Watchdogs, and it stands for Dads of Great Students. And while they don't have to be dads, they can be grandpas, uncles, father-like figures, male role models. It doesn't matter. Anyone can volunteer in that capacity. And so what happens is 5 days a week, they bring in a dad figure, and we come in and from 7:45 to noon, and we go to 3 classrooms. Before the day starts, we welcome the kids as they're getting dropped off and coming off the bus. And then we start in the classrooms. We go to 3 different classrooms throughout the morning, get to interact. Depending on how many children we have in the elementary, we prioritize to go to their classrooms. And then like I have 2 children in elementary, so then I get a 3rd classroom and we'll go into a classroom where I don't have a kid. And it's so much fun to be in that classroom because the first question is, whose dad are you? Who do you belong to? That kind of thing. And high fives in the hallway and love when they see you in the community and, they remember you and you get hugs or, whatever it is. It's just, and the opportunity to see the culture and the learning environment where the kids are every day is so much different than when you go in for conferences. It's not even comparable, to be honest. And so you get to see the teachers in action, you get to see the administration in action, you get to see the support staff in action, and just as in a hospital. And that's, I think, why I appreciate it so much is I know how many spokes there are in the wheel. And if one spoke is tattered or broken, the wheel can't turn. And so watching that in that school environment is something that I personally I struggle to articulate how wonderful it is. And so we get to go into the classrooms, like I said, and then we get to eat lunch. And so because, as we all know, the lunches can be staggered. There's 2 different waves when I go. And so there's a first group and a second group. So we'll eat with either group, and the other group, you just kind of wander around the lunchroom and just interact with the kids. And it's so fun to see specifically the superintendent and the guidance counselor and the principal outside every morning, welcoming the kids in, directing traffic, ensuring the safety of those kids. It is something that it makes my heart happy when I see, because it starts at the top, just as in a hospital. What behavior we accept, what behavior we ourselves exude is the behavior that we expect of those around us. And so if we are going to engage and be integrated in the community, we're going to be integrated in the building, we're going to expect that and should see that from the rest of our colleagues as well. And that is exactly what I see when I go into the buildings monthly. And so when we talk about authentic leadership, and I spoke earlier about my love of role play and dressing up in celebration, the school has embraced that and allowed me to bring a little fun into it. And so this is my 4th year doing this, and I go once a month. And I specifically in December always choose the last day of the term before they get out for winter break. And so tomorrow happens to be that day, and I will be going as the Grinch, and they're, super excited. I've gone as Buddy the Elf before, have worn really ugly Christmas attire before. And actually the first year that I did it, the last day of school, I went as Richard Simmons, and that was more for the staff and faculty than it was for the students, because most of them were like, who's that crazy man in short shorts and a tank top? And it even had the curly hair wig with a sweatband around the foreheads.
You got to send me a picture. You must have a picture.
I've I do. I do. I actually wore that outfit to work when I was CNO for Halloween. That happened to be the day that we had our new general surgeon come. So I got to meet our new general surgeon dressed as Richard Simmons. So,
Oh,
side
yeah,
note,
that's memorable.
yeah. So, this program overall, when you talk about the overlap of cultures, that is something that I cannot underscore enough. The palpable culture. Obviously, we all know everyone's not happy about everything, and there's always going to be, that's reality. But overall, the culture is palpable in a very positive way. You can see the excitement of the kids. You can see the love of learning and the love of teaching from the faculty and staff. And it's so wonderful. And those 4 hours a month are something that I treasure and really do fill my cup. They really give me an
Mhm.
opportunity to be myself, as you said. And that's one thing I've loved is they have allowed me to bring my authentic self. And that's what you want and what you hope for in a workplace and what you want to create and where you want to work. So that's the Watchdog program. And if anyone's interested in that, I highly recommend. It's a
Yeah.
nationally known program. You just Google the program called Watch Dogs, and dogs is plural, and there's a period between each letter. And like I said, it's incredible. It was brought to our community by a family that moved in from out of state, and they had it at their previous school. And our staff and faculty and administration embraced that. And here we are in our 4th year, and it's just been
Mhm.
a wild ride and something that the kids love. They'll come home and tell us about the watchdog for the day, and it's really cool. It's a lot of fun.
That is so awesome. You mentioned that is, like that family came from out of town and they said, hey, we used to have this where, we were before and we'd love to see it here too. And I love it when great ideas like that spread. We call that the case method, copy and steal everything, but make it yours, make it better, right? And I think that, we do that in hospitals all the time or healthcare all the time, don't we? And this podcast is actually part of this, is being able to spread what's working, help people hear about things that maybe they're not doing, that if they did do them, it might make a difference where they are. So that includes authentic leadership. That includes an idea like this, where we bring in volunteers in ways that we didn't think about it before to make a
Yeah,
difference in the lives of and in the culture of not just, the lives of our students and our teachers, but every time you introduce a new program, a new system, new people into your organization, it's going to have an effect. They're going to be affected by your culture and they're going to affect your culture. It's going to be both
exactly.
ways. So we have to be
Yes,
careful when we try to do this, right? That
correct.
we have an organized way and a real reason to do this so that
Yeah.
it doesn't backfire on us.
Every month when I go to the school, I think to myself, I'm like, if we could identify a way to do something like this in healthcare, just seeing the difference that it makes for those kids. And it's become such a normal thing that when they don't have a watchdog there a particular day, that is kind of outside the norm for them.
Yeah.
That's something that, as I've gone through this program, that I've really reflected on. Is I think that's why it's been so impactful for me, is because I see the difference, not just for this program, but the difference that having access to the program has allowed me to see the culture of the school where we send our children, and have the utmost confidence in what we see. So it's been not only cup filling, but professionally rewarding as well.
I'm glad you brought up the point about kind of the win-win, what's in it for you, and the fact that volunteering is actually a great resiliency tactic. You think it's like extra work, it's more to do, it can add to burnout or stress. But what's really great about volunteering is it does fill your cup. I do that myself for that reason. Like the reason I volunteer, one, I'm usually passionate about the cause, right? And I guess that's where the win-win is if you're actually engaged in something that's also meaningful to you. And obviously the lives and the education of your children as students there is important to you. So yeah, when we align our passion on, it's very personal what we give our money and our time to, right? And so picking the right things. So as we get ready to wrap up, it's amazing how fast these conversations can go. go, but I want to circle back to where we started on 2 points. One is what you're doing now is working with staffing of critical access hospitals. You to make sure before we end today, and we'll put information in the show notes about your company that you work for and its work. But I want you to put in a plug for that because I think you guys do it better and differently. One, you're very focused on small rural hospitals and in the Midwest, in your state of Iowa, particularly. So I love that. And so I'd like you to give a little plug for that if you would. And then lastly, if there's anything else you wanted to contribute related to authentic leadership, any last message or anything. So I want to end with kind of those two things, if we could.
Sure. Well, thank you. Yes. So I am the Chief Operating Officer for Highland Medical Staffing. So we are a small staffing company located in central Iowa in the city of Jefferson. So that's where our main office is. And so our company actually was started by a husband and wife. They're both nurses. They both were travelers and staff nurses. And our CEO, he is kind of the brains behind the company. He was the primary traveler between him and his wife, and he really saw a disconnect between the company for which he was traveling and the organizations where he was assigned. And so really took that to heart and took an incredible leap of faith in starting this company back in 2017. And here we are, fast forward to 2024, and we're in so many more buildings, and we've really been able to connect ourselves to that rural market because that's where our experience is and where this company got started in a critical access hospital. It was that hospital that needed some help and needed those holes filled. And so we specialize actually in PRN coverage. And so hospitals partner with us, and the only time they pay is if they use our services. There's no maintenance agreements or anything like that. So while we do offer contracts where we have those guaranteed 36 hours a week or whatever have you, it's really our business model is on that PRN way. So when a nurse calls out sick, they can call us and we can work to backfill. We work with a certain queue that's already been established in that building. And it's just something that I personally, as CNO, use Highland for, brought them into our organization. And I know what an incredible asset they were to us. Yes, it costs money, but the quality of nursing staff that was provided was, top notch and unlike anything that we'd experienced with other companies before. And so just incredibly proud to work for this company and the ability to continue while I don't work in a formal leadership operation or leadership capacity in a hospital. The ability to continue to stay in front of hospital leaders and impact the care that's delivered in those organizations is so incredible for me. And that's why I really do love what I do. And so we also offer some mobile vascular services. And that's something that I think I'm really, really excited about because it kind of gives us a leg up in many capacities. So we have nurses that are on call 24/7 who go around and insert PICC lines or midlines or help with vascular access. And again, that's a service that's only paid for when used. And what they do in the hospitals is a billable service. And so that really helps from a cost perspective because it offsets what costs are incurred. And so, like I said, their 24/7 response time is
and
typically
what a convenience for the patient. I mean,
absolutely. They don't have to leave their bed. They don't have to leave their room. The nurse
let
brings
alone their
with her
community or their local hospital. Yeah.
Exactly. So that has been, again, that service was something that I had when I was CNO at Guthrie, and the nurse that did that service for us has come on board with Highland, and so she just travels around the state when she gets calls, and there can be 5, 6, 7 days without a call, and then she gets 6 or 7 calls in a 36-hour period. So it's really feast or famine, as we all know. That's how the world is in healthcare. And so we also dabble in the provider staffing as well. But our main book of business definitely is the PRN nursing as well as the mobile vascular service. So something that I just really believe
think
in.
That's fantastic. I love the model. Greg, I just think it's amazing. I didn't even know stuff like that existed for rural hospitals
and most
when I
people
was
don't.
Yeah. And, it's not available everywhere to that level or to that level of organization and quality, but having that ability to rely on and know that you can provide great nursing care in high volumes or low staffing and have a bench just a phone call away.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
So to close, in terms of my final thoughts on authentic leadership, I just really what I want listeners to know is to not be afraid to be yourself. Now, when I say that, we were chuckling before, and I want to make sure that when I say be yourself, it's to ensure that you're being your kind self and that you have the best of intentions. Mm-hmm. But I say that truly from an authentic perspective, and I wouldn't be where I am today in my leadership journey had I not been myself. It's something that I learned very quickly, that as long as I'm myself and true to who I am, the rest will fall into place. And surrounding myself with people who were, well, yes, like-minded, but were able to fill in where I fell short or where my knowledge gaps were. We're only as good as, the people around us as well. And so surrounding myself with people who were like-minded and people who were driven like me to achieve great results is something that was so beneficial. And I think I would be remiss not to reflect on that very first leadership boot camp that I attended in Galena with you and Jane. And it's something that I think about a lot, and something that I do believe kind of was a springboard for my career and gave me some tools and gave me the confidence to really be myself and to employ those tactics in the workplace. And they do work. You just have to be diligent and intentional around every single one of them, and not get discouraged when there's failures or hiccups along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. I reflect often too on that first time we met many, many years ago. And, we do conference and have done conference for the last 13 years all around the country, primarily for healthcare leaders and rural healthcare leaders. And we've trained thousands of leaders now, thousands in what we would call our leadership bundle. And you're one of those memorable attendees that right away we did enjoy meeting you, knowing you, getting to know you, and then staying close to you all these years later. So it's a joy. And to have you here today, I much appreciate it. And I know our audience will too. So thank you, Greg.
It's an honor, Sue. I really appreciate the chance to talk with you today. So thank you for the invitation.
Thanks for tuning in to Culture Change RX. If you found value in today's episode and you are a believer in fostering change in healthcare, join us in making a difference. Follow, rate, and review our podcast on your favorite platform. Share it with colleagues and your network. Together, we can make a lasting impact. Until next week, keep inspiring positive change.